Okay, let's continue with our talk about new venture creation. And we're going to be taking a look at chapter 3, which talks about reaching success. Reaching success. And in chapter 3, there are four major topics that the author raises. So let's take a look at those topics. Let's see how they relate to reaching success with regard to your new venture. The first topic, the first major topic of the four that the author talks about is called mindfulness. Mindfulness. Now, there's a buzzword for you right there, mindfulness. A couple of comments that your author has about mindfulness. It is a characteristic that is critical for success. It means being focused on what is actually happening in the present, being focused on what is actually happening in the present. You're mindful of things. You know what's going on now. Uh, Also, another comment here, mindfulness is kind of the opposite of doing things mindlessly. Habits and routines tend to be done mindlessly. You don't have to think about it. For example, how often have you driven someplace that you drive on a regular basis? Maybe you're driving to school, maybe you're driving to work, whatever it might be. And you drive on a regular basis. And what you end up doing is you go out and you get in the car, you get in your SUV or truck or whatever, you turn on the ignition, you back out, etc., you get on the road, and then the next thing that you remember is you're driving into the parking lot at work. Well, how did you get from home to work? Well, you got there safely. You certainly were aware of what was going on, but you did so kind of on autopilot. You didn't really, you weren't really mindful of what was going on. Well, with regard to entrepreneurship, etc., and reaching success, the author's saying, no autopilot. You have to be mindful. You need this mindfulness. A couple more comments about mindfulness, just two more. Instead, what you want to do is you want to consider your purpose and desired outcomes. Consider your purpose and desired outcomes. Keep those in mind. Why am I doing this? What's my desired outcome? Along that line, two subpoints here. You want to make sure you're doing things for the right reasons. You're not just doing them, but you're doing them for the right reasons. It's part of your plan. It's part of your goal that you have here. It's part of this drive that you have. And along that line, the second subpoint, don't chase false hope. Don't chase false hope. Unfortunately, quite a lot of entrepreneurs, or these people who think they're entrepreneurs, have basically a strategy, and the strategy is hope. Well, hope's not a strategy. It's nice to be hopeful, etc., but you don't want to chase false hope. And frankly, until you start to pull the pieces together and see how things are going, you're not exactly sure what's going on. But once you start to pull the pieces together, if you start to see this isn't working right, keep that in mind. Be mindful of it, because if you continue chasing dreams that will never become reality, dreams that will never become success, well, you're chasing false hope, and you don't want to do that. And the final comment under mindfulness is you want to know, why am I doing this? Why are you doing this? Keep that in mind. What's your purpose? One of the other classes I teach talks about purpose being the center of a model, an entrepreneurial model. Know your purpose. Don't forget your purpose. Keep that in mind. And as you're doing things, you want to keep coming back and asking the question, does it or do they fit my goals? Does it or do they fit my goals? You don't want to waste your time. You don't want to be spinning your wheels. I think perhaps in an earlier class I mentioned to you that back in the 1960s, late 1960s, when a very popular show, one that today is still heard of and known, The Brady Bunch started. On the same night, right afterwards, I think The Brady Bunch was on at 8 o'clock, this was on at 8:30, or The Brady Bunch was on at 9, this is on at 9:30. Same channel, same network. Another show started called The Partridge Family, which was a fictitious show about a family, all of whom were musicians, and they traveled around, played in a band or whatever. But the lead actor of the show, who was also the lead singer in the family, was a true musician, a guy by the name of David Cassidy. And he had a somewhat successful career both before, during, and after this show. And he died not too many years ago. So at his deathbed, his daughter was there trying to take care of him, final respects to Dad before he passes, etc. And David Cassidy said some final words before he passed. Now, it's amazing that oftentimes you think final words, are words that are supposed to be important in some way. People tend to remember your final words. Well, his words were as well, but they're a little bit different, and they go to what we're talking about here. His final words were, "Too much wasted time. Too much wasted time." Now, there's a heck of a thing to say as you're passing away, but it's a good real thing to realize. We do waste so much time in our lives, and you don't want to waste time as you're chasing these opportunities, etc. You don't want to chase false hope. You want to be mindful of what's going on. You want to be living in the present, looking at the future, remembering the past, but living in the present and being mindful of what's going on. That was the first point under reaching success. As I mentioned, there were 4 major points in Chapter 3. The second major point in Chapter 3, some commonly assumed essential entrepreneurial traits. Some commonly assumed essential entrepreneurial traits. As you know, in our oral class, we talked about what we thought were stereotypical traits of a successful entrepreneur. And we also mentioned that the author basically says, well, anybody can be an entrepreneur. It doesn't matter what traits you have. So there's really no set traits for an entrepreneur. If you take a look at Steve Jobs and compare him to, say, Roxanne Quimby, both are very successful entrepreneurs, their traits are very, very different. So the author's telling you, well, there really are no standard traits for an entrepreneur. Well, what this is saying is these are commonly assumed essential traits of an entrepreneur. Again, not all entrepreneurs will have all of these, etc. You might not have all of them. You might not even have any of them, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're not an entrepreneur. But these are the ones that we assume are traits. So let's take a look at some of the commonly assumed essential traits of an entrepreneur. The first is passion. I would agree with that. Most of the people I know who are successful entrepreneurs have passion. They know what they're doing. They're passionate about it. Their drive is driven by their passion for it. And frankly, you need that passion to drive you because there's so many road bumps along the way. You need to have that extra energy, that enthusiasm. You need to have passion. The second commonly assumed essential trait is resiliency. Resiliency, and this sounds pretty good to me. This is basically you're going to forgive yourself and others, and even forgive fate. Forgive yourself and others and fate when you screw up. Things aren't always going to work. You're going to be knocked off your horse, etc. You're going to make mistakes, etc. And what you want to do is you want to be resilient, get right back on it, don't quit, etc. Go right back to the job that we have. And the author says something here that I think is pretty important here. He says, the past is past and you cannot control it. The only thing you can control, if that, is the present. Past is past, you can't control it. The only thing you can control, if that, is the present. So you want to be resilient. Again, it's mindfulness, we're looking at the present, etc. Problems arise, etc. Be resilient, get right back on the horse, keep driving, etc. Don't worry about screwing up, and don't spend most of your time blaming yourself, blaming others, blaming fate. Just focus on the future and move forward. I think we talked in an earlier class about the case of Pittsburgh Steelers former head coach Bill Cowher, who said that he was not a rear view person type of guy. He spent most of his time becoming successful by looking forward. If you're driving someplace in a car, you're looking forward. Now, do you look in your rearview mirror on occasion? Sure, every now and then you do. You learn things from the past. You have to see what's happening as you're driving in the past. But do you drive going forward by looking in that rearview mirror? Heck no. So what he's saying here, Don't blame yourself. Don't focus on the past and mistakes. Learn from them, but move forward with regard to this. Let's go to the next of the commonly assumed traits. Vision. I would argue this is another good one. So what we're talking about here is, your vision for the future, what you see. Oftentimes entrepreneurs see things that others don't. Couple points here that the author makes. He says you want to keep an eye on your long-term goals. Keep an eye on your long-term goals. Don't forget about them. We can get lost in the day-to-day details, etc., but don't forget about those long-term goals. He uses an interesting quote here, though. He says basically, with regard to those long-term goals, you want to be stubborn but flexible. Stubborn but flexible. I'm going to continue. I'm not going to be knocked off the path I'm on. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to continue. But I'm going to make adjustments. I'm going to be flexible. And that actually came from Jeff Bezos over at Amazon. He was saying, hey, how do you be successful? Have an idea where you want to go. Go for it. Be stubborn. Don't let people get off the track. But be flexible, so you can make some adaptations, adapt this and adopt that, etc., because things are going to arise and your original plan has to be changed. So you have to be flexible, but be stubborn too. Still on this concept of vision, another thought that your author has here is that everybody in the world that is going to try to give you advice and suggestions and feedback, etc. And that's really nice. Many of them have great intentions. They might give you good advice, bad advice, whatever, good suggestions, bad suggestions, whatever it might be. And what the author says is stick with your vision, sift through all this stuff that people are telling you. They may see something you don't. They may find a solution that you won't. But on the other hand, again, be stubborn but flexible. Still in vision, another thing that your author mentions, and this involves another buzzword, buzz phrase, and it's also a good one. He said, with regard to vision, you should avoid the shiny object syndrome. There's a buzz phrase for you, shiny object syndrome, of chasing after every new opportunity. The shiny object syndrome of chasing after every new opportunity. Here's something that we're talking about, the shiny object first, just so that you know this. Let's say that you're in a store, and you're checking out at the store, and you're in the checkout line or whatever. And you went into the store and you just wanted to buy one thing. But as you're in the checkout line, oh, that looks nice, and I'm hungry for that, and oh, look at the price of that, etc. And the next thing you know, either in the checkout line or even as you're walking through the store, instead of just buying what you wanted to buy, you're all of a sudden buying 5 other different things in different directions. You're depleting your resources. You're spending more time, etc., on this, etc. And what he's saying with regard to business, don't be someone who chases the shiny object. Keep in mind what your purpose is, but as you go through and you start seeing all these other little things, say, oh, that looks good, etc., like that, keep in mind that you don't want to chase every shiny object of opportunity, because what you'll end up doing is, just as I say, when you go to the grocery store, you're going to be spinning your wheels, using your resources, spending time, etc., doing all these different things, and you're not going to be going very far with regard to what you should be doing. Along that line, we have talked in class about strategy, and strategy is so important for businesses, and particularly for entrepreneurs as well. And I've oftentimes talked about in the past a Harvard business professor, Harvard strategy professor by the name of Michael Porter. And he's come up with, unlike a lot of people who write all these different articles for all these different journals and trade publications or whatever, and academic magazines and things like that, he oftentimes comes up with some really insightful and practical ideas for business, and particularly with regard to strategy. And one of the thoughts that he has is it's really important as you pull together your business that you make all the different parts fit. Marketing has to fit operations, and operations has to fit finance, make all the parts fit. And I think that one of the things Michael would say with regard to the shiny object syndrome is what you want to do is with regard to anything that all of a sudden pops up. The only ones you want to go after and try to bring in, etc., the only shiny objects are those that fit. Those that fit. You'll find that most of them don't fit. Oh, that's neat, etc., but it has nothing to do. It's not going to help you with what you're talking about. So Michael Porter is also talking about the shiny object syndrome and saying, hey, don't waste your time going after every shiny object. Just go after those that fit, those things that help you proceed and pursue the opportunities you have. Let's take a look at the next of these common traits, and that's calculated risk-taking. Calculated risk-taking. Basically what you'll find is most entrepreneurs are generally risk takers, at least more so than most of us. They see an opportunity and say, well, let's go for it. Whereas most of us, we don't even see the opportunity, but even if we do, we'll come up with a million reasons not to do it. There's all sorts of risks out there, but oftentimes you'll see the entrepreneur say, hey, let's take the risk. I think the reward is worth it, etc., and I think the probability of the risk turning out to be true is low, etc. So you find most of them are risk takers. But he says that they're calculated risk takers. They just don't jump off cliffs or whatever. They usually take a look at what's going on before they take a risk or deny the risk or whatever. They look at what's going on. It's a calculated risk taking. But one of the things that he's saying here is they will indeed, though, take the risk. After they go through the calculations, if it makes sense, they'll take the risk. Because good entrepreneurs favor action over endless analysis. Good entrepreneurs favor action over endless analysis. You might have heard the phrase paralysis by analysis. There's another buzz phrase for you, paralysis by analysis. That means that before you do anything, you just analyze and analyze and analyze, and you analyze it to death, etc. And by the time you finally decide, well, I'm going to do it, assuming you make that decision, well, we mentioned earlier, opportunity is a moving target. The opportunity is gone. You can't do it. It's gone. And I have a good friend of mine from the past, another attorney, who is the godfather of my oldest son, the son that's in med school. And one of the things he wanted to do, in addition to his law career, which has been quite successful, is he wanted to start a blog. And he started doing all sorts of research on blogs, etc. And he has been researching blogs now 10, 15 years. And he's never started a blog. And I asked him, why don't you just start a blog? It's not that difficult, etc. And what are the risks, etc. And well, I got to read some more stories. I looked at this, I looked at that, another article over here, etc. So what we see is he's never making the decision to proceed, and I guess also not the decision to stop. And it's paralysis. He's kind of frozen in place because he's spending so much time doing analysis. So what we talk about, they're calculated risk takers, and related to that, remember that concept we talked about earlier in class, another buzz phrase for you, they fail fast. They fail fast and then they will pivot. There's another buzzword for you, fail fast and pivot. They think, hey, listen, I'd rather fail fast and pivot than do nothing. I'm not the type of person to sit around and do nothing. I have to do something. So do some calculated risk taking, etc. And if I go ahead and it doesn't work out, okay, I failed, great. I'll fail fast because I'm jumping right back on that horse. It goes back to that resiliency thing that we just talked about a little bit. And I'm going to pivot. It goes back to I'm going to make some adjustments, right? I'm going to be stubborn, but I'm going to be flexible, make some adjustments, etc. And then I'm going to continue to go forward. So that's calculated risk taking. The next of the traits that's mentioned by your author is hard work. Most entrepreneurs are hard workers, at least those that I met. They don't work quite 24/7, but it's almost, even when they're in bed sleeping at night, they are thinking about their business, and they're tossing and turning, sometimes not even sleeping. And even when they're sleeping, they're oftentimes dreaming about their business, etc. So you find that hard work is certainly a common trait. Now, the author mentions a couple of things here with regard to hard work, and I'll mention one and refer you to another in the book. The author says if you're going to do hard work, and let's face it, we know entrepreneurs are going to do hard work, at least a successful entrepreneur is going to do hard work, most of them are going to do hard work, you should know what you're doing and why. If I'm going to work hard, I should know what I'm doing, and why am I doing it? Otherwise, why should I be putting in this hard work? So you want to know what you're doing and why. And this goes back to what Michael Porter was saying a little bit ago. whatever you're doing should fit your goal. Remember, we want to have everything that fit, etc., should fit your goal that you have. The only other thing about hard work that your author mentions, I'm going to make a reference to something in your book. There's a quote on page 41 of your textbook by Mark Twain about hard work and enjoying your work, etc. And I would encourage you to take a look at that quote by Mark Twain on page 41. Well, let's go to the last of the common traits mentioned by your author here. And it's another buzzword for you. Lots of buzzwords in this chapter, and the buzzword is flow. Flow. Flow is defined as focused, productive, and uplifting. Focus, productive, and uplifting. You can also add rewarding if you want to that, but focus, productive, and uplifting, rewarding. Let me tell you what we're talking about flow. Have you ever had some task that you've been kind of postponing, etc., for whatever reason? And then as you start to eventually do the task, you're really kind of surprised at how things start to come together. Things are looking pretty good. In fact, surprisingly good. And as they're coming together and as things are going together, your flow, the flow of your progress is going faster, etc. Everything's going, you're kind of enjoying this, etc. It's somewhat uplifting that we have here. It's certainly productive. All these things are coming together. That's talking about flow. You want to have good flow, right? I guess you could have bad flow or whatever, but he says most good entrepreneurs have flow. They have a way of, once they get involved in this, off they go. And you probably have seen people like this. They get so immersed in whatever they're doing, and things are going so well, etc. They don't want, other people coming around and taking their attention. They're focused on this. They're going with the flow. A couple other thoughts about flow. The author uses a phrase, in the flow. You want to be in the flow. And once you're in the flow, you generally will lose track of time. You're so immersed in accomplishing things, you'll generally lose track of time. Being in the flow, having flow, it's the opposite of things like anxiety, apathy, being weary, being bored. If you have anxiety and apathy, if you're worried and bored or whatever, you're not in the flow. If anything, you've probably stopped and not doing anything. Nothing's flowing except for, maybe horrible thoughts through your mind or whatever. So this concept of flow is important. The only other thing I'll mention to you is the author talks about 8 characteristics of flow. 8 characteristics of flow. And as opposed to going through a list of 8 in this, I'm going to refer you to page 42 of your textbook and take a look at figure 4. Figure 4 on page 42. And take a look at the 8 characteristics of flow. Well, that finishes up the second major topic that we had. That was the commonly assumed traits or whatever. Let's go to the third. Remember, I mentioned there are 4 major topics. Let's go to the third major topic. It says other aspects of reaching success. Other aspects of reaching success. What he talks about here is he says you need to have a work-life balance. You need to have a work-life balance. You're working for yourself, but you still have to make trade-offs, right? You can't work all the time. You have to make some trade-offs. You have to make some compromises. You're human. You need to have this work-life flow. Some entrepreneurs forget that, and they become so immersed in the flow, so to speak, so immersed in their entrepreneurial project that their personal life is not going anywhere, or maybe it's going in a bad direction. There's an awful lot of entrepreneurs who have ended up either in divorce or being bad parents or whatever, etc., and also having perhaps all sorts of mental problems and physical problems related to the mental problems, etc. So you want to have this work-life balance. It's very difficult to do. There's actually a chart, a triangle you want to take a look at on page 43. It's figure 5 on page 43, and I'll show you that triangle. And the final word that he has under this work-life balance is he says you want to try to recognize that your venture is not you. I mean, at times it will see that way, particularly if you're really in the flow. You and the venture, this is one and the same, etc. But you should recognize your venture, this entrepreneurial idea, this project that you have, it's not you. You want to separate the two of them in order to protect both of them. Separate the two of them in order to protect both of them. I thought that was an astute thing to say by your author. And the final thing I'll mention under this work-life balance is he does reference a case here that's in your book. And you might want to take a look at, it's called the Huffington case. Take a look at the Huffington case. There's particularly a quote in there you might be interested in, and that's on page 44 of your book, page 44. Still in this other aspects of reaching success, the first of these points that we looked at was work-life balance. The second is living, the second I'll get to now is called living a self-actualized life. Living a self-actualized life. You want to be successful or whatever, live what's called a self-actualized life. For those of you who have taken psychology courses, those who have taken organizational behavior, you probably talked about a fellow by the name of Maslow, who came out and talked about human needs, etc., particularly in the workplace. He said, there's 5 or 6 basic needs we all have. You can categorize them, and they're prioritized. They're basic needs we have to fill first, and etc. And you move up. He basically built a pyramid of these needs, going from 5 to 1 or 6 to 1. I think it was 5. I can't remember. But the top of the pyramid, the last of the needs, after you've fulfilled everything else.
It's 12 o'clock.
The last of the needs was self-actualization. Self-actualization, which is basically being all you can be. You talk about being in the flow. You're in the flow of life. I mean, this is being all you can be. A good example of this, Bill Gates, right? Although perhaps with his personal life he's got some problems or whatever, but things are going really pretty well with him, and not only with regard to his business, he was able to start going out and self-actualizing by helping others and his nonprofit and all this other stuff that he had going on. So with regard to this, he's saying basically, the author's saying you should live a self-actualized life. He says you want to be creative in your pursuits that you have here, your entrepreneurial pursuits. You want to be authentic though. Stay true to yourself. Stay true to yourself. Don't sell your soul to your idea to cut corners to be successful or whatever. Be authentic that you have. And a last point that he mentions here under self-actualized life is someone who is at that top pinnacle still usually is not satisfied. They still want to get better. So the last aspect of a self-actualized life, beside creative and authentic, is you want to continuously improve. Continuously improve. You want to improve your business. You want to improve yourself. There's a buzzword for this. It's a Japanese word. It's called Kaizen. Kaizen. K-A-I-Z-E-N, K-A-I-Z-E-N, Kaizen, and you want to improve yourself. And one of the things that's interesting is he says usually we improve ourselves in increments. I mean, sometimes an epiphany opens up and we improve ourselves immensely, in one step. But usually we improve ourselves in increments. Don't stop those incremental improvements. Try to make yourself better. So self-actualized life, you want to be creative, authentic to yourself, and continuously improve, Kaizen. The fourth and the final topic then for today, there are 4 major topics. We've talked about 3 of them. The last one was other aspects of reaching success, business success. The fourth and final topic he has is called sudden versus incremental change. Sudden versus incremental change. This is an odd section of this chapter because there's basically no text. There's just a chart, so you want to take a look at the chart. It's figure 6 on page 47. Figure 6 on page 47. And just a couple of comments here with regard to this. He does talk about one other aspect here. It's not really related to sudden or incremental changes, but it's a pretty good topic. He says that most entrepreneurs generally make lousy employees. Most entrepreneurs generally make lousy employees. They like being in charge, but they're not too good working for others. And one should think about it. I'm going to tell you why in a moment, but why would you think most entrepreneurs generally don't make good employees, particularly the most successful entrepreneurs don't? He lists a couple of reasons. He said, first, most people who are real entrepreneurs, they have these visions and they want to pursue those visions, they have a passion or whatever. They're not committed to the employer's culture or goals. They're committed to their vision, but not to the employer's vision. They're committed to the entrepreneurial vision, but not to the business they work for. Uh, Oftentimes, when they're working for someone else, they really don't see a payoff for themselves. Okay, I got a paycheck and I can go buy milk tonight, keep the lights on or whatever. But usually entrepreneurs are big dreamers and they want more than having lights on tonight at home and a bottle of milk in the refrigerator. Another comment of why they make lousy entrepreneurs is oftentimes they butt heads with their superiors. Entrepreneurs oftentimes butt heads with their superiors. Can you think of some reasons why an entrepreneur might butt heads, with their superiors? Certainly, the entrepreneur sees things perhaps differently than others and might see things differently than the boss. I got that. A great example of this is, remember we talked about the Roxanne Quimby case, and part of that was when they moved to Maine, there were 3 restaurants in town, and she worked for all 3 and got fired at all 3. She was a waitress, and she was a really good waitress. She got tips out the door because she was a good waitress. Well, she oftentimes got fired because she fought with her bosses who were trying to tell her how to be a waitress or whatever, and she had her own idea. This is how you be a waitress. Obviously, she was right because she kept getting the tips, etc., but her bosses said no, and she ended up getting fired. And then the final point, the third and final point of why entrepreneurs oftentimes make lousy employees is often when they're at work, they drift from their job. They drift from their job. Entrepreneurs tend to be easily bored. They're often restless, and they're oftentimes looking for something better. They're easily bored, often restless, often looking for something better. Basically, as I say, they drift from their job. Their job is not their dream. They have this dream, they have this passion, and it's not working at McDonald's flipping hamburgers or whatever for somebody else. Well, that pretty much finishes everything in Chapter 3 about reaching for success. That's some good points I think that your author mentioned here, and also a lot of buzzwords that are mentioned, so you want to go back and take a look at those. A couple of cases, a couple of examples, etc. you want to keep in mind, and the various figures you want to go back and look in your book. But I hope you enjoyed the lecture in Chapter 3. I hope you picked up some pointers here that are going to help you in your entrepreneurial journey, help you to turn your vision into reality. If you have any questions, certainly let me know. But other than that, I'm done with my lecture for today. Hope you have a great day coming up. I'll see you later. Bye-bye, everybody.